Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to let you know that we're going to begin the recording, and welcome to serve as a leader, the four pillars of servant leadership with Professor Ron Smith here at Alvin Community College, where he teaches sociology. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you now, Ron.
Hey, thanks guys for joining me. It's good to be back on Teams, man. Got to get back used to this, but we'll try to get through it. Again, thank you guys for joining me. Just want to make sure we can see my presentation, correct? Perfect. All right. So you guys may hear some music. We'll see if it goes through, but I've been here at Alvin for man going on my fourth year. So, and this is one of the presentations I really like doing regarding servant leadership. I've been doing it for a while, but obviously things change as far as like the material. But and you can always stop me if you have any questions. Obviously, raise your hand, stuff like that. No problem. Uh, and I'm sure Thomas is there to look at that. But if you got any questions or any comments, please, feel free to stop me because I tend to talk fast for sure. But one of the things when we talk about servant leadership is, uh, yeah, I guess my stuff is not gonna play. It's all good. When I went to college undergrad, I played football, and my coach, he's passed away here recently in 2019. He was the one that kind of got me thinking about servant leadership because he served us. He gave us an opportunity to get a football scholarship and come on a college campus and kind of changed my life in a lot of ways in terms of the direction coming to Houston and things like that. So when I think about servant leadership, Coach Bill Thomas is one of the ones that really he was a true servant. And after he finished coaching football, he coached for years, college football. He was still on campus, man, worried about if we're graduating and things like that. That's what a true servant leader does. And we'll see specifically what a servant, exactly the definition of servant leadership. But when I was an undergrad, this is one of the textbooks that I had to purchase. And my bachelor's is in criminal justice or administration of justice, and my master's in sociology. And my minor was in sociology too in undergrad. But we had to focus on this book. And I was like, okay, you get all those books, whatever. But this one, it kind of stood out to me. And I really liked it, man. It gave a lot of good information. I still have it to this day. I didn't sell this one back. I actually kept it, and I'm glad I did because I'm in certain leadership roles. So it kind of got me thinking, like, man, what is this servant leadership about? And we see it every day. Uh, what type of leader am I? So I really started thinking about servant leadership and just leadership in general after that particular textbook and that class I took. I can't remember what classes was. I just remember the book. So when we look at servant leadership itself, particularly, you have a lot of literature that covers this particular topic, but it boils down a lot of times to this guy, Robert K. Greenleaf. A lot of the literature goes back to him, even though there's other theorists and things of that nature that talk about servant leadership, but it really focuses on Robert K. Greenleaf. He grew up in the Midwest. He was born in the Midwest. Older guy, obviously, he was in the Industrial Revolution. I mean, he's dead now, of course, but dude was like the pivotal like Midwest person or whatnot. And you see his bona fides there, where with the college and things like that. Try not to read the PowerPoint, but one of the main things is he worked at AT&T. Perhaps this is when you could work at a company for like 40 years and retire and get all that other pensions and things of that nature. Perhaps it may not be like that today, particularly in certain areas, but he worked for AT&T for years. All right, he kind of changed the game as far as how and what he brought to AT&T. All right, he and remember this like what, I don't know, I have to look, but 50s as it says there. So clearly here in the United States there was racial divide, segregation, and things of that nature. But what he did was he brought a lot of care and equality to the particular job that he was doing. He didn't care if he was black. He didn't care if he was a female. He put you in position so you can be successful. So he started out being a servant leader, early. All right. He was like, that's why a lot of the literature goes back to him because he's showing what it takes to be a leader, all right, and how to serve others, as we'll see here shortly. He brought also certain people to talk to the company, famous theologians, psychologists, to speak about the wider implications of corporate decisions. Now, think about it. This was probably, you know, unheard of, bringing in a psychologist. I don't know how happy people were about that, but he still did it, let alone a theologian, somebody from the church, if you will, in that particular ilk, talking about, certain things in the corporation. Again, he was at AT&T. So you got to give Robert K. Greenleaf credit, man, because he was really just kind of like a pioneer, a trailblazer in this situation in terms of servant leadership. Um, Still talking about Greenleaf, he retired in 64. He started to become a writer, a consultant, a teacher. So the dude was multifaceted. All right. And one of the influential writings that he talked about regarding servant leadership, it was in 1970. And he talked about basically, hey, man, he was a Christian personally, but he talked about you don't have to be a Christian to be a servant leader. This is for everybody, people of faith, people of no faith. It's basically you want to essentially treat people the way you want to be treated, and you want to be willing to be in service to them. All right. And like I tell my students, this is like a class, I guess. You don't have to agree with anything I say. We're not in a cult, CULT. Everybody has their different perspectives because everybody has different backgrounds and different thought processes, and that's great. All right. So, hey, some people may dig this, some people may not. I don't want anybody to feel like that, they have to agree with anything that Robert K. Greenleaf was talking about or what I'm talking about. That's why I say, hey, if you have any questions, any comments, feel free, because it's good that everybody incorporates their thought processes and their different backgrounds into this particular conversation. But I think it's important to realize that you don't have to be a Christian to be a servant leader. People hear about servant leadership and some of the things that it entails, and they're like, oh, that sounds, biblical, which it is, according to Robert K. Greenleaf. But just being a good human, just being a nice person, just being, caring about others, that doesn't take any effort. And that's what Martin Luther King talked about. We'll look at that here shortly. I like what Robert K. Greenleaf said. He died in 1990. He was back at home when he did that. I'm from Indiana, actually. I'm from Indianapolis. So when I drive in, which I hate from Texas, I'll never do that again. It's pure hell. But when you drive in, you right from Texas, you'll pass Terre Haute. It's like at the Top Conda. So it's a small, Midwestern city, Midwestern town. So he was at home when he died. So that's good. He said Robert K. Greenleaf, had a sense of humor. He was like, he wanted his tombstone epithet to say, potentially a good plumber ruined by a sophisticated education. That's apropos for today for sure. But very nice guy. I never met him. Wish I did, but nevertheless. So it's interesting because even when he died in 90, the New York Times wrote an obituary about him. All right. 86, Robert K. Greenleaf, 86, pioneer of humanist business philosophy. It's interesting how they, frame how Robert K. Greenleaf was, and that's what the news does. They frame certain things. But I mean, they did do an obituary on him, and they talked about how he worked at he was the conscience of AT&T. All right, how he retired in 1964. And these are just some excerpts. You can read this obviously on your own online. They talked about how he wrote about servant leadership, and I got some of this highlighted because it's going to be interesting when we look further ahead and how what you do in the past, helping people, it'll come back and it'll help you. So you want to make sure that you do things right, so later perhaps things will come out and help you. All right. Some people will call that karma. Some people will call that blessings. It depends on your perspective. But servant leadership, a theme that deals with the reality of power in everyday life, it is legitimacy, the ethical restraints upon it, and the beneficial results that can be attained through the appropriate use of power. So, man, I got to give New York Times credit on that. But look here, it talked about, where he lectured at. Hey, he went to universities, foundations, churches. And as we stated earlier, he was a consultant for the Ford Foundation. These are obviously different foundations. But look at that, the Lilly Foundation. All right, the Lilly Foundation. And he talked about the American Federation. All right, some other stuff. But I got that Lilly Foundation highlighted for a reason. And Thomas, I'm in a view where I can't see hands. I don't think so. Just let me know if anybody has hands up. But
Absolutely.
thank you, man. Look at this Lilly Foundation. All right, so this is Seton Hall. All right, Seton Hall is a Catholic university, and they have a Center for Vocation and Servant Leadership. All right, let me drink some coffee. Great. They have a Center for Vocation and Servant Leadership. All right, so as you can read there, but when you look, all right, it was started in 2003. And who was the one of the generous supporters, basically, who was given a lot of money? Lilly Endowment. So we go back. So Lilly Foundation, I'm sure that's the Lilly Endowment, pretty much the same thing. But and it says to further their goal in preparing the next generation of church leadership. So think about this. This is in 2003, right? That they established this in Seton Hall. What Robert K. Greenleaf died in 1990. So a lot of the things that and this is generally speaking, we're building a foundation in our life. All right, we're as individuals, as scholars, as stakeholders, perhaps as parents, as whatever the case may be, kids, as sons and daughters, we're building a foundation in our life to like establish the future. I tell my students all the time, hey, you're not just getting your education for yourself, but you're doing it for your kids in the future. You're building a legacy, right? So what you see Robert K. Greenleaf, what he was doing, he was building a legacy, and that legacy in 2003, I don't know those numbers. I know we got some math people here, 2003 minus 1990, whatever, however long that is. He built a legacy where the Lilly Foundation / endowment was like, you know what, we're going to remember him. And they dedicated a Center for Vocation and Servant Leadership. I thought that was pretty cool. So there's this I don't have it on here, but there's this episode on the Twilight Zone, right? And it's called The Served Man, right? So it's kind of a play on words, but they end up eating humans. And you see the definition of servant leadership here. Canavesi and Minelli in 2021, a form of moral-based leadership where leaders tend to prioritize the fulfillment of the needs of the followers, namely employees, customers, and other stakeholders, rather than satisfying their personal needs. So this is basically a leadership style of not being selfish. So I know I talk about in my class in certain chapters, you have instrumental leadership and you have expressive leadership. Instrumental leadership, you just want to get a task done. Your goal, the leader's just goal oriented. Hey, let's just get this task done. Expressive leadership is like, hey, you care about the morale of the group and things of that nature and making sure they're okay, right? But servant leadership perhaps is an offshoot of expressive leadership in the sense that you care about the other person or the other group, and you're specifically aching to serve them, essentially, right? Not to say, excuse me, not to say that instrumental leadership is not important, uh, and only expressive leadership is important, but I would argue servant leadership is probably the most important in a sense. And notice that moral-based leadership. Now, obviously, how you define morals, we can go deeper in that. I'm not going to do that now. But the fact of the matter is that you're caring about other people. All right. You're caring about their outcomes first and then yourself. So it's not a selfish leadership style. And if you want a group to be successful, you got to be able to delegate tasks, and you got to have an overall connection with the other group members. So this is not a leadership style where you're an aloof leader. You're really in tune to what your members need and what they want. All right. Now, I'm not trying to be political or anything in that sense, but when you look at our government and Congress, particularly senators or even congressmen, sometimes they can, particularly in Washington, they can be detached from what the people need. And they don't exactly have that connection, perhaps, to their constituents. All right. Obviously, that's more of a macro scale, but just think about you in your class, perhaps. I mean, do you really have a thought process in terms of what your class needs or uh, what they're expecting from you in a sense, right? So you're just trying to make that connection, if you will, with your group members. In any organization, there needs to be an individual who is able to lead groups with. Obviously, you want to be effective in your leadership. I know bureaucracies can tend to be, slow. Ironically, they're supposed to be more efficient, but if you got a good leader, perhaps you can get through that. And of course, what Robert K. Greenleaf said, good leaders must first become good servants. I agree with that. So I know we got administration in here, perhaps deans and things of that nature. Obviously, you had to be a teacher and then kind of go into there, and then you work your way up or whatever. You got to basically crawl before you walk. You got to be able to be a good servant before you can be able to serve others or be a leader. Sometimes, generally speaking, people want to be leaders, but they never serve. So if you never serve, then you got to be on that other side of the coin. Everybody wants to be a leader. Everybody wants to be at the top, but nobody wants to start at the bottom, if you will, by actually, being in service to others. And of course, you see Martin Luther King Jr., what he was talking about. This doesn't take any money. It doesn't take any high degrees. You just got to be a good person. You just got to be willing to serve. I'll read the quote just because everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to be have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love. And I'm not trying to sound sappy, but it is what it is. And this is just a question to ask yourself. I mean, how much love in our society do we have today? It seems like that everywhere you look is just so much chaos and things of that nature. But perhaps that's just, small bit. I would argue most people in the world have this heart to serve, this heart of love. All right. And you don't have to be a perfect person. I want to throw this out there, and this is Gandhi. All right, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. These people are not perfect up here. And I just want to make that clear. You don't have to be a perfect person. Nobody's perfect. I mean, Robert K. Greenleaf, I'm sure he wasn't perfect. Definitely Martin Luther King wasn't a perfect person. If you know what's going on with that FBI and all that other stuff, but what Martin Luther King did for society was tremendously important, and he served well. But was he a perfect person? No. Gandhi, he wasn't a perfect person. Clearly, if you know his situations, but what they were willing to serve and things of that nature. So nobody has to be perfect. You just got to be willing to serve others. All right, so man, time goes by fast. I'm like, man, this is a long, but I got a lot of time. All right, so serving. These are the pillars that I really want to focus on. We talk about servant leadership. There, there's several. There are many, but there's several. I'm only going to focus on four of these: listening, foresight, building community, and commitment to growth. Commitment to the growth of people. So let's look at. Well, we'll get there in a sec. So Greenleaf, he was saying to be a servant leader, he said it's like a natural feeling that one wants to serve first. I don't know, that's what he said. It's like becoming a servant leader begins with a natural feeling that one wants to serve first. And perhaps everybody doesn't want to serve. Like Ford stated previously, don't want to serve first. The best test is this is the best test. Do those serve grow as persons? Um, think about, do our students at the beginning of the semester, well, the 8 week is tough or whatever, but there still can be progress to be made. Do your students, are they growing from the first day in class to the last day of class? We can look at it like that. Do they, while being served, become what? Healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, more likely to become servants? So I would hope that after my students leave my class, they're more likely to be, hey, more critical thinkers, more willing to, give other people grace in terms of their thought processes and things like that, in terms of their culture, in terms of their backgrounds. So that's my hope. I kind of look at this right here in that sense, as far as my classes and my students that I work with. So still talking about leading self and others, and we'll specifically hit on those pillars here shortly. But I just like quotes because this servant leadership is all around us, and we probably didn't even know, but it's all around us. This is Tony Haish. He recently passed away, like during the pandemic. I think it was like 2020, 2021. He died tragically in a house fire. He was the CEO of Zappos.com. All right, so if you ever shopped at Zappos, this was the CEO, but he tragically died in a house fire, if I'm not mistaken, not some years back. The best leaders are servant leaders. They serve those they lead. All right. Booker T. Washington. So if you want to lift yourself up, lift someone else up. I really love that because you're trying to not lift yourself up, but you're lifting other people up. And we want to give other people their flowers. We want to give other people their due, right? Don't just always want to pump yourself up. All right. And a good leader, they're going to put their followers on blast and be like, look what this person did. They're doing a great job. They're excellent. If it wasn't for, Sally, I wouldn't be in the position I'm in. Right. And what that makes you look great as a leader, because you're basically delegating to other people, and then when they do well, that's a great reflection on you, right? You don't have to like build yourself up and pump yourself up to, be somebody. Pump somebody else up, give them their flowers. Perhaps that's what Booker T. Washington is trying to talk about there. And Maya Angelou, basically what she's saying here, people, they remember how you make them feel, right? They may not remember everything that you said, and they may not remember exactly the thought processes that you wrote down, but they remember how you make them feel. Just like you can listen to a song, and then 5 years later, you listen to that song again, you're like, man, you remember where you were, you remember how you felt, you remember what you're thinking then. All right. So that's what Maya Angelou is saying in terms of the type of leader you want to be. Of course, MJ, earn your leadership every day.
This
You're
is John
consistently,
Tompkins.
yes.
Hey, I would love to have done that, but I have to stay home with my kids today because my wife teaches at the district and the students are off today. So I'm working from home.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. But here's the deal. I can come in later in the day and hold up like the last couple hours, maybe like around 3,
John,
3:30 or something like that.
John, I think that you are speaking to a breakout session and you intend to be talking to someone else.
I muted him. It's good now.
Thank you, Deb.
All right. Thank you, guys. Where I'm at. All right. Of course, MJ, you want to make sure you earn every day. You're not. I always look at it like, when I go to work, this is me, because it took me so long to get where I am as far as like success, quote unquote. And I'm never like, oh, I made it or whatever. Like, I'm here. Let me just, relax. No. Every day when I go into my classroom or go into my office, like, I'm consistently like it's the first day. That's how I'm grinding. Like, I'm grinding. Like, I go to work like it's my first day. Like, it's my first day on the job in terms of my energy and my passion. I don't want to do like, I'm a professional now. Yeah, I'm good. No, every day you want to earn that. Perhaps not anybody at ACC, because we're excellent there, right? But perhaps in other, just in other corporations, maybe some people are like, I made it, I'm good. Let me just go to work, earn this paycheck. Nah, I'm never like that. I'm still gonna, make sure that I'm organized. I'm still gonna make sure that even though I've lectured over this particular chapter 1,000 times, I'm still gonna look in the textbook, look over my PowerPoints, and make sure that, is there any little thing that I can, look at and make sure that it's updated and make sure that I'm on point. So you're earning that leadership every day. Don't take it for granted. And of course, that's MJ. I mean, the dude got like 6 championship rings and he's a billionaire. And then you look at Muhammad Ali, service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth. We got to be willing to serve. So little thought processes there that you can, put in your pipe and smoke. So, and again, we're getting to those pillars more specifically, but this is just some stuff to kind of keep in mind as we move forward, tracing the growth impact of servant leadership. Servant leadership as an institutional model. You have corporations that are using this model of servant leadership for their bottom line. And servant leadership is likely the best investment a company can make. So Forbes had an article, and they were talking about servant leadership can help companies and employees join together in providing hands-on service to create a better community and world. So it's very altruistic in a sense regarding these corporations and why they take on servant leadership model aspects. And of course, as I stated, a lot of companies are starting to embrace this servant leadership model. And we're starting to see a lot of this. I could go in detail, but a lot of companies are trying to be more altruistic, particularly corporations. And I'll just leave it at that. But Zappos, these are a few. Marriott, Container Store, TDI Industries, Nordstrom, and Starbucks. We shop at these places perhaps a lot or a little bit or once in our life. FedEx, Jason's Deli, man, I thought that was pretty interesting. So even Jason's Deli, they follow a servant leadership model. So you can kind of look at that. So next time you're getting a package at FedEx, just know that hey, they're following servant leadership. When you go get that latte, you go get that red eye at Starbucks. Like man, they're following a servant leadership model, if you will. And so when you look at some of the literature, this is just 2 years ago, servant leadership and systematic review and a network analysis. They're looking at corporations. They did a study and it was a quantitative analysis. I believe they did some number crunching, but the bottom line is what they talked about in the paper, organizations. All right, you can look at this. So job satisfaction, organizational commitment, public sector, and they're looking at it more of a macro. They're talking about China, but specifically when you look here, Capilia, however you say their name, demonstrated that HR managers servant leadership positively influences organizational employees overall their overall justice perception of justice in the organization, which in turn enhances organizational commitment. Hey, I'll run through a wall for my boss, and job satisfaction. Hey, I love my job. So when corporations and organizations implement servant leadership models, I would argue ACC, we have a servant leadership model, even though we don't say, hey, this is a servant leadership model. We're big on serving our students. All right. Perhaps other colleges would say the same. I don't work at other colleges. I work here. I just know the thought process that we have here. And I would argue that we have a sense of a servant leadership model, even though it doesn't say, hey, this is a servant leadership model aspect. Organizational employees, overall justice perception. Hey, this organization is fair. Organizational commitment. Hey, I love this place. I don't want to leave. And job satisfaction. Man, I'm happy with my job. I'm happy with the things I do. So even the literature is showing that servant leadership model components used in organizations is good, if you will. And of course, this is where we get to the pillars. I know time is going by fast, so let me kind of go through this. So number one is listening. How are your listening skills? So you can look at this. Obviously, we know communication is key, particularly with us, most of us that are here working with students and having to communicate. But listening is one of the biggest components, not just talking. You have to listen to what people are trying to tell you. Only a true natural servant automatically responds to any problem by what? Listening first. We have to be able to listen, not just talk. Even though that's what we do, we lecture, we talk, but listen is important too. Great leaders know that the art of listening. All right, so it means that they can keep their mouth shut until the person is done talking, right? But before you speak, you should check whether anyone is still talking, right? And my deal is, I try, particularly in my personal life too. Like I go to places, I'll go to gatherings or whatever. I don't talk. Like I listen, and people are like, man, this guy's serious or whatnot. He doesn't say too much, and people think I'm very serious, but it's not that I'm being serious. It's just that I don't talk as much. I like to listen, and then when I get to know people, I open up and I talk. But Richard Branson, the Virgin guy, his corporation, lead by listening. To be a good leader, you have to be a great listener. And I had a little music playing. Obviously, that's Gwen Stefani back in the day with Don't Speak. But anyway. So another Forbes article, this is last year, The Power of Servant Leadership, Building a Path to Lasting Business Success. And you can look at this. They're talking about integrating servant leadership principles in all aspects, personal and professional. Then here it says, by doing so, leaders can create an environment of trust and open communication, ensuring that every voice is not only heard, but is also valued. Free speech, perhaps in terms of that nature, again, as I started saying, we're not in a cult, CULT. Everybody should have their voices heard, and we may not agree with everybody, right? Everybody comes from a different background. Everybody has a different thought process. So this is perhaps pivotal in a corporation, in an organization, particularly on a college campus. Everybody should be able to have their voices heard. And again, I'm not saying that everybody's going to agree with each other, but it's good to have different thought processes and not have that sense of group think where you have to think the same way. No. And of course, in this kind of career, servant leadership entails recognizing that your success is intertwined with the success of your team. Kind of goes back to what I was saying about Booker T. Washington, where you're a leader, but you want to also show some love to your team. Let your team eat. when you get on, your team gets on. Like if you get an award, it's your team. They should get an award too because you didn't do it all by yourself. This is good leadership. I'm sure we're old enough and we've been around long enough to know bad leaders versus good leaders. All right, what good leaders do? They put their team on. They're like, man, if it wasn't for these guys, I wouldn't be in this situation. And when you have that thought process, you are a servant leader because you're serving them first and then yourself last. But ultimately, you're serving yourself greatly because you're worrying about them first. And this all stems from Robert K. Greenleaf. So we're talking about a 2023 article from Forbes. This basically stems from Robert K. Greenleaf in terms of what he was talking about, right? And you can look at this. You just want to have a dream. You can read this quote from Robert K. Greenleaf. You want to have a dream, and I don't want to sound sappy, but you got to have a dream. What is something that you want to be in terms of your success, whether it's personal or whether it's professional. My dream is, look, dude, I always dreamed about being a professor, mid 2000s. I didn't graduate college and was like, hey, I want to be a professor. No, I was probably going to be a police officer. When I graduated high school, I was like, hey, I want to be a police detective. Maybe I can go work for the FBI. And then ultimately things changed or whatever, obviously. But when I put my mind was like, man, I want to do this. Like, hey, I want to be a professor. I want to be in academia. It was hard to get here, sleeping out my car, like, being broke, et cetera, et cetera. And now I'm online. I'm talking for a living. Basically, when I go to work, I'm like, hey, I'm walking to the restroom, I'm in my office. I'm like, your job is just to be smart. That's your job, is just to be smart and to read and stuff. So that's pretty chill. Obviously, you got a grade and stuff, which that sucks sometimes. But that is my dream, right? My dream is like I'm walking the halls of academia and like sometimes I'm like, man, this is my job. Like I can talk for a living and I read and interact with people. That's my job. And I get paid fairly decent, like comparatively in terms of what I was in the past. So you got to have a dream. Much more than dreamer is required to bring it to reality, but the dream must be first. You got to have a dream, right? Martin Luther King had a dream, of course, but I like what Robert K. Greenleaf says there. The second one is foresight. Now, 18. All right, 19. This one is very big, particularly now when we talk about what we see. That picture should have been gone, but particularly what we see now as far as the whole technological advancements. But sorry, guys, I gotta move that. Bear with me. All right, bear with me. All right, perfect, because I want to make sure we get to see that what I'm saying here. So you have to have foresight, be able to look in the future in a sense, right? So better than average guess about what is going to happen when in the future. All right. So that's what we're talking about. You got to be prescient. So foresight is a characteristic that enables the servant leader to understand what happened in the past, the realities of what's going on now, and what may happen in the future. All right. What are the consequences of the future? All right. So again, you have to have a characteristic in the sense where, hey, what happened in the past? You don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. You want to see what's going on right now in terms of the reality, but also you want to have like a sense of what's going to happen in the future. All right. So foresight. All right. So obviously we know JFK, he had a lot of foresight in terms of what he was trying to do. All right. We know that Steve Jobs with the iPhone. I mean, think about what it took to bring that to fruition as far as like, hey, you're going to have all these things in this particular little device and that iPhone basically screwed up BlackBerry's model and they went down the toilet. All right. So just that idea kind of broke the landscape of a lot of technological devices in that sense at that time. And of course, you see here Thomas Edison, what he talked about, all right, as far as like the light bulb, but he just didn't say, all right, I got the light bulb right now. No, this dude, he failed on a lot of things, whatever. I mean, I don't know, 1,000 or so he was talking about. And of course, Meta, or Facebook, dude was in his dorm, all right. It was just for Harvard as far as like this thing to find people. Obviously, perhaps you know the story. And it ended up being the Facebook and then Facebook and now Meta and some of the places that he's trying to take Meta in terms of the metaverse and some of the things like that. I mean, I'm sure perhaps in his dorm, he probably was thinking, this is Mark Zuckerberg, by the way, he's thinking, what can I do with this? All right. And it just went so fast as far as like Facebook/Meta, and it's still continuing to go. And finally, as I had up there before, this is Sam Altman with OpenAI, Chat GPT. That's a big thing that we've been talking. You got others, Copilot. You got a lot of other OpenAI systems that are coming online. All right. So these individuals, particularly the top gentlemen in Silicon Valley that are active now, they are changing. You can talk about Elon Musk with the Neuralink and some of the things that they want to do with that. So particularly in that sense, I mean, the foresight is key. And obviously we've been talking about this as an institution and other colleges in terms of what is the future going to look like with Chat GPT and some of these other aspects. How can we implement that, or how can we how can we harness that, if you will, if we have to be successful? So I think now more than ever, as we've been talking about already, our leadership, ELT and such, we have to start thinking about how AI, artificial intelligence, is going to play a role in the college landscape in the future. So I would argue that's why I say, hey, man, and again, I'm not up here sucking up. I'm just looking at it from this standpoint. Particularly in ELT, we have some servant leaders, man, particularly in this particular pillar as far as foresight. And think about this. Even when Dr. Exley came in, one of the things that he was talking about was e-gaming, right? So that's why I say we do have leaders that have these particular servant leadership capabilities or these qualities. He was talking about, Dr. Exley was talking about esports when he first came in. Some colleges don't even discuss that, but esports is like a big thing. That's like national, that's international. So we're on point with that. So we do have leaders that have this foresight component to them. Number 3, all right, building community. So I'm going to stick to this for a sec because I want to focus on this. I'm almost going to wrap up here shortly, but let's look at this specifically. So one, we had listening, pillar 1. Pillar 2, we have foresight. All right. Pillar 3 is building community. So the rise of large institutions has eroded community, the social pact that unites individuals in society. So we have these big bureaucracies, we have these big institutions, and perhaps the personal interactions have been lost. All right. And we're going to look at some different components to this. So Greenleaf, he was saying all this is needed to rebuild community as a viable life form. You can kind of look at that. And we need servant leaders to kind of show us the way to where to go. Let your actions in life be an example for others. All right. So, and again, I just want to just be honest. Obviously, well, not obviously, but perhaps these are biblical principles that Robert K. Greenleaf talked about. But again, you don't have to be of any faith to have this particular thought process as a servant leader. You just have to be, a person to serve others. All right. So even though if this stuff sounds biblical, according to Robert K. Greenleaf, that doesn't mean that you have to be of that particular persuasion, if you will. You just have to be willing to, as a person, just as a human being, to be willing to serve others and things of that nature. So again, let your actions in life be an example for others. You've been an example to your children if you have that. If you have children, you've been an example to your students. You've been an example to the community. You never know who is watching you. All right. You never know who's watching you. So that's why I'm like always on point at work. I'm always on point, just personally in my life. I try to do my best because you never know who's watching you when you go to the grocery store or whatever the case may be. You want to keep that in mind that, there's something to you, like you're a light shining in perhaps a dark place. People watch you consistently. All right. Therefore, let your decisions be a positive guide for others to model. Right. And if you're a parent, you know that like kids repeat stuff consistently. So what you're listening to, what you're talking, and again, these are things I talk about in sociology in terms of the environment and things of that nature, right? So just kind of keep that in mind. This is like from a sociological perspective as well. All right, so still talking about communities, and anytime I lecture and I'm talking about communities, I'm definitely going to talk about Ferdinand Tönnies. All right, so we have to build offline communities. We build enough virtual communities, as we'll see shortly. But Ferdinand Tönnies, he talked about, this is his book, Community and Society. And what he said, I may not have said this right, Gemeinschaft, which is community, was exemplified by the family or neighborhood, and Gesellschaft, society, exemplified by the city or the state. So what he's saying in terms of these two components, Gemeinschaft, community, is like, hey, do you, in past times, you would know your neighbor. You like, hey, Bill, how you doing, Bill? I'm doing well. Michael, okay, et cetera, et cetera. Do you know your neighbors now? I know like one of my neighbors' names. The rest of these people I don't know. I probably see them, but do we have that sense of community? But that's what happens when you become in a modern world, a modern society, a technological society, where a lot of our interactions are, yeah, we're in real life, but we have more virtual contacts of more virtual interactions than we do face to face, even though we're surrounded by people consistently. Guess what should have society exemplified by the city or the state? Think about when you go to Starbucks or you're even walking on campus. It's notorious. I mean, students are consistently looking at their phones, even staff, faculty and staff, we're looking down on our phones. We have the earbuds in. That's notorious. The earbuds are like, are you paying attention? Or are you not? We're so focused on, we're insulated from people, even though we're around people consistently. And this article, I'm going to be honest, ladies and gentlemen, it really like, um, it infuriated me in a sense, but it's good information. Socially distant was in 2021 at the height of COVID. All right, but certain things that they say here kind of infuriated me as far as like how they were talking. It's like, all right, they were double speaking, but that's neither here nor there. But what they did in this article, what they talked about, and these are just some excerpts. I encourage you though to look at this. It's open. They talk about work and communication at the height of COVID, when we were doing Zoom and doing Teams and things of this nature. But one thing stood out to me, says emerging evidence suggests that virtual connection is not as conducive as face-to-face contact for discussing personal problems. Right. So we had all this contact, FaceTime, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously we need to do that for safety. Okay, whatever. But my point is that the literature is showing that, hey, the virtual connection is not as conducive to later on mental health and physical health, frankly, as opposed to face-to-face contact. They're going to say, you can look at this in the past research on support crisis situations show that face-to-face contact, but not virtual interaction, was associated with improved well-being. All right, so face-to-face contact. And what are we talking about? We're talking about building communities. All right, you can have virtual communities, but those virtual communities only take you so far as like your mental health and your physicality health, right? Face-to-face contact is what we need according to the literature in terms of health. And this is like, dude, this is 2012. Like, this was known. This is consistently known. This is nothing new as far as like face-to-face contact being crucial to our mental health and physical health. And the importance of building an offline community. So you can read all this, but the crux is Bowling Alone was a book written by Robert Putnam some years back. He just had this. I got about 16 minutes. Perfect. I'll finish up here shortly. But he wrote this book, Bowling Alone, and basically the collapse of revival of American community. The crux is, hey, do we go out and play cards? People. I love Lucy, one of my favorite TV shows of all time. But obviously, technology wasn't as advanced, and I'm not against technology. I love technology. I love all of it. It's fine, but there is a drawback to that as far as like our connections as human beings, our community systems, if you will, when these technologies come online. And what he's basically saying in this textbook, or in this book rather, and I want to be fair, I haven't read all of this. He's basically saying, hey, we don't go and bowl. We don't go together as a community and play cards like we used to. We're more isolated now as far as like, because of the technology, we're more isolated. So that's taken away from the human contact that we once had in the past. All right. Some people say, hey, well, Mr. Smith, there was no cell phone around in the 50s or whatever, where they were playing cards and I Love Lucy. They barely had TV or not. They sat around and listened to the radio. They sat around and did things like that. So of course they're not going to be isolated. Maybe, maybe not. But I can kind of agree with Putnam is saying there. And of course, you see what a virtual community is. And I don't have a lot of time to go into it, but when we talk about anomie, it's basically a feeling of isolation. Emil Durkheim, the sociologist in 1897, wrote a essay called Suicide, and just basically saying, people started to commit suicide in these cities, or whatever, because they felt the sense of isolation, moving away from their families on the farms during the Industrial Revolution, essentially. And, they're in these factories, they're in this big city, and they just felt this sense of isolation, and that suicide rates jumped. And Emil Durkheim argued like, hey, why? Because it creates this sense of normlessness. They lost that connection, that group connection that you had with their primary groups, i.e., their family in the farm. So kind of cool when you kind of think about that and how important we are to each other as far as like human beings. And you can look at this again, all this stuff. If you guys want this PowerPoint, you always can, hit me up and I can send it out. But a lot of I've done this before, but I update it as things change. And I believe this is one of the things that kind of transpired since the last time I talked about this. But Facebook's new bet on virtual reality. The New York Times wrote this article at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, if you will. And you can read this, but the crux is that you had Mark Zuckerberg, and I'm not picking on Zuckerberg. It is what it is. The metaverse. This is when they're like, hey, well, for safety and other reasons, we can just meet in the metaverse. All right. So you see Oculus, they may be on a different Oculus, but I think that's the most recent one that I know. And you see Apple, if I'm not mistaken, came out with their goggles. I believe it's Apple. And I read an article, I saw an article last night where people are bringing those goggles back or whatever because they experiencing nausea, can't see, and some other motion sickness and some of these other things. So you're not going to get the same. And I'm not knocking these things because I've tried the Oculus in terms of the metaverse, and I can see why people get addicted to it. It's kind of crazy, but it's not the same as face-to-face contact. So you can build virtual communities, but building community face to face is the most important because we're human beings. All right. So when I see some of these elites and some of these entities saying, hey, we can just go online and have virtual communities perhaps permanently, I kind of cringe at that. Being a sociologist and kind of knowing that literature on that, I disagree with that. I think we definitely need to make sure that we're building our communities face to face and not just virtual. Not to say that we can't use virtual, but only to a certain point perhaps. Again, almost wrapping up. So, and this is CNET. CNET is a pretty popular internet slash technological blog or news outlet, if you will. 5 reasons you should unplug from social media for your mental health. And it says spending time offline can help you foster better relationships in real life. And basically what they're saying is when you spend time offline, you're more willing to build those relationships, i.e. community. So that's what we're talking about. I believe this is pillar 3. We're talking about building communities, all right, offline communities particularly. They said 5, but I only chose one that kind of sparked my interest, meaningful connections in real life. That was one of them. And it says that they talked about this study in 2019 that found that smartphones alter the fabric of social interactions. And the study that they're referring to is smartphones reduce smiles between strangers. All right. So the present research provides the first experimental evidence that smartphones reduce smiling when people have the opportunity to engage in casual social interactions. I saw Tim Cook, he's the Apple CEO of Apple, and he was giving an interview fairly recent. And the lady was like, so what would you say to those people that, say that technology, I'm paraphrasing, that technology, it doesn't make us more connected? And he was like, this is Tim Cook. Well, if I find myself with my face buried in the phone and not smiling at someone, then I know there's a problem. So I mean, the research is known. The research and the literature is out there that technological advancements and technology is making us less connected. Again, we need those, or perhaps they're important to have, but from a servant leadership perspective, from a sociological perspective, we still need to build those offline communities, right? So what happens when all those devices and technological aspects are no longer available? How are we going to be able to interact with human beings after those virtual communities are null and void? And another literature, so this is from 2023, this was just last year, directly measured smartphone screen time predicts well-being and feelings of social connectedness. And you kind of read all that. I just got to highlight it. Smartphone use predicts lower feelings of social connectedness and fewer and less satisfying social interactions, both with close social ties, such as friends, et cetera, et cetera. They're talking about primary groups there. And then they talked about weaker social ties with neighbors. They're talking about secondary groups there. But I think we get the gist of that. We need to build communities offline and not just online. Got 10 minutes. I guess being a professor, I'm so much of a stickler on time. All right. Pillar 4, final pillar. So commitment to growth of people. Commitment to growth of people. So the demonstrated appreciation, encouragement of others. Always want to encourage other people. All right. I'm always like, hey, great job. And you're not being like, just patting somebody on the head just to think who you are, because you're all that. But you actually need to give people their flowers, man, and just like, hey, man, you're doing a great job. Thank you so much. And Greenleaf said the secret of institution building is to be able to weld a team of such people by lifting them up and grow taller than they would otherwise be. Again, going back to what we talked about previously, you want to build other people up. All right. Don't be so insecure. And this is just generally speaking, you guys are adults, but this is just, don't be so insecure that you're worried about somebody being better than you or getting recognition as you, right? I love being behind the scenes. I'm totally cool with being behind the scenes. You know, because if you are willing to be behind the scenes, right, and then success transpires, right, you eventually get your flowers and be put to the forefront. All right. So, you want to build other people up. Servant leaders believe that people have an intrinsic value by their tangible contribution as workers. And of course, the servant leaders deeply committed to the growth of each and every individual within their institution, not from, I'm talking about from in our instance, from the top in terms of the president of the college all the way to the last individual, to whoever. And we do a great job of that at ACC. And I'm not just trying to pump up ACC, but it's true from Dr. Exley all the way to the groundskeepers, whoever the case would be. Not to say the groundskeepers are like low people, but everybody's important. It's a team effort to make the college go, and I can appreciate that. And my last slide, this is in the servant leadership book that I showed at the very beginning. 20 distinctive attributes observed in servant leaders, functional attributes. You can kind of look at this. I mean, honesty, trust, and just think about some of the organizations or institutions in our society. Do we have honesty? Do they have honesty? Do we trust them? These things. All right. And accompanying that attributes, communication. Are the communication skills good? Obviously, the listening aspect there. All right. So, an encouragement. All right. I think I highlighted some things I thought were very important. Honesty, integrity, trust, credibility. All right. Teaching. I guess that would be us for sure. I think my teaching skills are on point. I could be better, nevertheless. Appreciation. Again, these are some things I think I highlighted on here. Communication. Yeah. So we're in good shape. Yep. All right. Any questions for me, man? That was fun. And what time? Man, 38. I did pretty good. All right.
Ron, there is a question in the chat from Cindy Diamond. She says that the exchange of oxytocin between individuals is not as significant in person. So virtual interaction is okay, but not great. That kind of like AI, there's a balance for smartphone use. But the question is, those are great. Any thoughts on why humility might be missing?
Wow. What's up, Cindy, man? Thank you, guys. I don't know. I really can't say. I would argue it depends on the background as far as like where they come from as an individual, their family, the way they grew up, and things like that. But that humility, I'm not. I don't know. I really don't have an answer for that. To be honest with you, I would just say, what is their background? I have to look at, what is their family structure. What is their socioeconomic status in terms of how they grew up? That's what I would argue. But obviously, I'm a sociologist. I'm looking at the environment. Cindy probably would know, from more of a psychological standpoint, but I wouldn't know. But
well,
I'm
sorry,
Go
she
ahead.
adds that most people don't see humility as a strength, but it is.
Cindy, I agree. So you got to be willing to make yourself vulnerable. I think I do that a lot in class. So I can show my students like, hey, yeah, I'm up here. You may look at me as successful, but I still think I'm not successful. To be honest with you, I feel like I'm a failure in a sense. I could be super far ahead, but nevertheless, I'm just showing my students like, hey, I have humility, right? I know you guys are sitting in front of me and I'm up here lecturing or whatever, but at the same time, I'm like, I still got a ways to go personally. So humility can be a challenge for some academics. Oh, for sure. And I think we see that just if you watch keeping up with the whole academic situation, what's going on in some of these major colleges. I would agree with that for sure. I do believe humility is a strength. And I encourage all of us to have that humility and make it a strength for us. Excellent. I think I did really good on time, guys. 41. Excellent. I was watching my clock, man, because I'm very big on time, man. Very, very big time stickler on that. So All right. Thomas, am I good?
You are good, sir. I don't think anyone has any more questions, so we can end it here. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.
If I'll be at TCCTA, I'll be doing this presentation as well. So if you're at TCCTA, come check me out, man.
Excellent.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.